Oh, I got it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into, you're not in my studio, you're in the library, which is why all these books are behind me. But my name is Emily Steinberg, and I am a multidisciplinary artist who focuses on painting and visual narrative. And I operate just outside of Philadelphia in a little town called Wyncote, where I'm broadcasting from today. So I was really fortunate enough to get a grant from SVA, S3A last year. And I proposed what I thought was kind of an interesting idea, which was to do a visual narrative about the idea of sustainability and kind of the idea of how we as a planet are misusing and abusing our resources and what's happening to the planet as a result of that. So I got the call that the proposal was accepted in January, and I was starting to work on everything, and then the pandemic happened. And so, of course, that became a bigger part, really, of my looking at how we are sort of, it's a massive fail, which we all know, of how we are sort of misusing our resources on this planet. So what I did was I decided to first starting off doing research, and I researched a number of different aspects of kind of how we abuse resources as a world community. And of course, one of them is in how we cut down trees. One of them is how we abuse animals in terms of factory farming. And we are unbelievable, we cause unbelievable cruelty, but we also, and that cruelty also inflicts incredible damage onto the earth. So factory farming also contributes to clear cutting. It contributes to incredible wastewater going into the earth, which poisons the area around these places, these factory farms. So that is a huge, huge thing. Also, that McDonald's can have enough hamburgers to feed the billions of people in the earth. We have 7.9 billion people on Earth at the present moment. And I think by 2050, it's supposed to be 9.6. We will not be able to sustain everybody at the way that we're going by 2050. So we'll need 3 planets the size of Earth to kind of make it possible to feed everybody. So we're really at a moment of we're at a dire moment. So as I said, I started doing research. I did research into factory farming. I did research into the forests. I did research into what's going on in plastics in the ocean, which is a whole other story. How do we recycle things? What happens to the trash that we make? And I really started realizing that it's almost too big of a topic to look at on a macular level. And so in some ways, it's really important that each individual person looks at it on a micro level, looks at it in terms of what can you do as an individual? What can you do each and every day to make a difference in this unbelievable precipice that we're at the moment? And so that's really kind of how I framed the visual narrative. It was kind of a series of questions. What do you do with your waste? How do you recycle? How many airplane rides a year do you take? And really what it comes down to in some ways is the choices we make are all about our own personal wants and desires versus the health of the planet. And we are all so used to things that if we want things, we do them, right? We just go out and do them. Choices have consequences. And the individual choices that each person makes every day adds up to a cataclysm for the planet. And really that's where it's at. So when when COVID happened last year, I started thinking about, how with everything shutting down and the planet got quieter and traffic's kind of quieted down and factories closed and smoke was no longer belching into the air. And it was almost as if someone was saying, time out, right? Like we had to take this time out. And it was kind of remarkable on two levels. One, how quickly the earth rebounded because the levels of poison in the air were going down, the emissions were going down. The use of fossil fuel, everything just kind of cratered. And we sort of rebooted amazingly quickly. But the other side of that is that as we are ramping up to re-enter into normal behavior, it's going the opposite way again, just as quickly. So we really need to find long-term solutions to, how we manage these things, how we manage these resources we have, water, forests, animals, all this kind of stuff. And it's more than that. It's really, we have to sort of, from the ground up, have a more holistic way of looking at the way that humans inhabit the earth. We need to see ourselves as stewards. We need to see ourselves as people, as beings in concert with other beings, as opposed to using those other beings. So it's a really different mindset. And we have a lot of work to do in terms of sort of getting this around. All summer long, I worked on this story and I read hundreds of articles about it. And it was so depressing. Like literally, it was a very, very depressing summer last year because this is what was on my mind. So all I can say is that I'm actually very happy that this summer I don't have to do this assignment because I don't want to be stuck in that kind of that world again. It's not a very happy world, but it's a world, it's a world of questions that we really need to answer. So with that, what I want to do is I want to share my screen. And I got to hang on one second. I got to get my link. Okay. And we're going to go to website URL. Okay. And okay, so hopefully you guys all see this. So as I said, it's a 22-page visual narrative, and here you're seeing it in a PDF, which is 2 pages per one slide. So you're going to see sort of a 2-page spread kind of thing. And as you can see, I started out with kind of a memory that I had of when I was a little girl. There was a TV commercial, and it's actually been pointed out later on that the commercial, there was some sort of drama around this commercial. But the thing that I remembered as a little kid was there was this Indian Native American in a canoe paddling past kind of smokestacks and trash in the water and horrible stuff and highways full of cars. And this is in the early 70s. And I remember seeing this, and I remember at the end of it, the camera pans up to his face and he's crying. And there's just this huge tear that's kind of coming down his face. And that really struck me because here we are now, about almost 50 years later, and we're still, if not in the same predicament, in a worse predicament. And that is just unbelievable to me. What's happy, a happy thing is that just yesterday, President Biden dedicated himself to, I think, reducing carbon emissions in half by 2030, which is unbelievable. So great news. And, hopefully we'll see if that happens. So we go through the story. Let's see, how do I go through the story? Oops. Okay. Oh yeah. We go through the story. And as I wrote here, it was really gloomy and horrible to think about this. And And basically, when we look at Earth from these from space, Earth is enveloped in a veil. It's almost like the veil of darkness, of pollution, of whatever it is, but we're sort of shrouded from space with a veil. And to me, that was really a very, very powerful image. The other thing that I chose to do in this visual narrative was to do close-up shots of my eyes, because basically this is a story, an autobiographical telling of my reaction to these things. And I think the eyes are the most expressive part of the body. And I like this kind of close-up onto the eyes to describe the emotions of what is going on as the speaker, who is myself, is talking. So we've pushed nature to the limit, and we find ourselves in a world of trouble. And as I said, we'll need 3 planets the size of Earth to provide enough resources to sustain us all. So I sort of talk about how it's all intertwined, what we use, how we use it, and how we dispose of it. And the fundamental reality is that we have unlimited wants and needs, and our resources are limited. That's basically the long and the short of it. Probably all of you guys can feel it too. I remember as a kid in the 70s, my parents would be talking about traffic and how it seemed like there was a lot of traffic, but to us it seemed normal. Like that was kind of the flow and the were happening. To me today, the amount of traffic seems hugely, hugely just inflated. And in fact, there are 1.4 billion cars on the road worldwide today. So it's just this enormous amount of kind of steel and fuel being used and noise and traffic, really clogging the world as we see. We fly around too much. We use planes too much, and they are also causing unbelievable carbon emissions into the atmosphere. We use way too much plastic. I don't know how many of you have been to Trader Joe's recently, but for such a progressive store, everything is wrapped in like huge shards of plastic, everything. So we need to go back to the days where nothing is in plastic, where you go to a store and you get 3 red peppers and you put them into your bag. Now, I know a lot of people do this, but a lot of people don't. And the small percentage of people who are conscious of all this stuff is far outweighed by the majority who have no consciousness of it. I mean, zero consciousness. And we're not just talking in the United States, we're talking worldwide, globally. Methane gas emitted by cows produces the same amount. So every farm is huge, huge part of this problem. And we waste too much of what we produce. So there's so much food that goes to waste. So much of the stuff that is used for purposes. Lots of plastic is used for short-term purposes. People buy it, then just ditch it and throw it out. Where does it go? It goes to landfills. It is not just about you. And I think that is really, as I was doing all this research, to me, again and again and again, what came back to me is that this sort of sense of individual entitlement and selfishness on everyone's part is ruining the planet for everybody. We all need to kind of step up and put on our big boy and girl pants and say, okay, maybe this isn't so great. Maybe I can kind of do without for a little bit. You know, maybe I can do without. And it's really a new way of thinking, I think, certainly for this generation. And I think it's a lesson that we all need to learn. So I ask people, think of your own energy use. How much gas do you use? How do you power your home? How many flights do you take? And how much meat do you eat? And multiply this by 7.6 billion of us. Okay, you cannot even conceive of that amount. The taste for meat is wreaking havoc on the planet. not to mention the cruelty and suffering that it incurs. So factory farming slaughters 200 billion animals a year and produces 18% of global greenhouse gas emissions and causes widespread deforestation. So you've heard of the Brazil rainforest coming down so that people can eat McDonald's hamburgers. Basically, that is sort of what it comes down to. And I think on some level, it's really important to bring these things down to very, very simple levels of cause and effect. And of course, factory farming, taking down the factories leads to rampant topsoil erosion, which leads to people being unable to farm crops. And it just kind of goes from there. It's a domino effect that happens as we kind of mess with the way things are set up. As we as humans try to engineer this stuff, things are irrevocably changed and we can't really get them back. So the runoff waste pollutes waterways faster than nature can purify them. And what I was really thought about last summer was, can we somehow take this moment of quiet, of calm, of kind of like enforced, and try to reformat how we exist on this planet. Okay, so let's see. So kind of talk about the mindlessness of the way people consume things, the way people consume meat in a store when they're sort of confronted by the meat counter, basically with these pretty little packages of kind of like clean little pieces of pink, whatever it is in there, not really putting two and two together, like where this stuff came from and how it got to that point. We're sort of I'm talking about the mindlessness of the way people just throw stuff into the water, plastic bags, and they're strangling seals and sea lions in a huge numbers. The plastic bags that we all get from CVS or from wherever we're going, right? People say, you know, one thing you can do at the store, I don't need the bag. Don't take the bag. It might not end up in the ocean if you don't take it. Sea turtles are 50% of them are dying from ingesting plastic waste every year, sea turtles. And this is really just a travesty. One baby sea turtle was found with 104 pieces of plastic in her stomach. Obviously she was dead, and that's how they could count it. So, you know, again, do you really need to drink that water out of your plastic bottle that you're going to just throw away the next second? Polar bears is now the diet of polar bears is now 25% plastic because climate change has eroded their natural environments and they are scavenging in human areas and ingesting plastic. Plastic bags take forever to decompose. It takes them 10 to 20 years. A plastic bag, a simple Wawa plastic bag, will take 10 to 20 years to decompose. Plastic bottles take 450 years. And I think it's really important to keep emphasizing these absolutely outrageous numbers. So let's think about waste. Humans create mountains and mountains and mountains and mountains of waste. A family of 4 on average generates 6,500 pounds of trash a year, which is equal to the weight of 2 cars. So we have to really think about, you know, how do you cut down on your waste? How do you cut down on your own stuff? How do you really, it's almost a cliche at this point, but how do you limit your carbon footprint? How do you make yourself less of a presence on the earth rather than more of a presence on the earth? So we talk about recycling. 1/3 of trash is recycled or composted. 2/3 of it ends up in landfills or in the oceans. And that's causing an enormous problem in the oceans. and think about the amount of trash that you kind of generate and multiply it again by that number, that staggering number of 7.6 billion people. So without action, the global waste will increase by 70% in 2050, 70%, and we will have no room for it all. So the pandemic really caused us all to think pretty intensely about kind of the interconnectedness of everything, right? Like all of a sudden we were terrified of leaving our homes. We were crazily wiping down surfaces. We were not going out. We were isolating. And we all started to think about, where did this thing come from? And one of the things that I think we really have to kind of put our heads around is that COVID-19 was transmitted from animals to humans because humans exploit wildlife. And we infringe on their habitats, we bring them into our worlds, and their diseases jump to us. It's that simple. And on some level, it's almost like a cosmic voice was saying, stop messing with wildlife. Stop trying to bring them into our spheres. So that's really what caused COVID-19, was this kind of jumping from wildlife, these wet markets that these exotic animals are brought into, have diseases, and they spring to humans, and that's exactly what happened. So we have to find a more compassionate and intelligent way of interacting with the natural world, of interacting with non-human beings, simply because they cannot speak and simply because they can't process information at the rate that we can, doesn't make them worthy, or doesn't make them, they shouldn't be subjected to this kind of treatment that humans have really been subjecting to them to for time immemorial, but really since the advent of the Industrial Revolution and kind of the sort of factorialization of food production. So when the lockdown began, humans went inside, shutting down huge swaths of the global economy and ceased their usual activities. We drove less, we flew a lot less, and we consumed less. We also spent a lot less money. Motorways cleared and air pollution plummeted within weeks. And there's tales from all over the globe that all of a sudden wildlife started coming back into human areas and sort of going onto the roads. And you would see moose walking or sort of like ambling along interstate highways, and all this other kind of things, like animals felt comfortable again because there weren't cars out there to kill them. Factories closed, and with no smoke belching into the air, the skies cleared. The gray veil that we spoke about at the beginning of this presentation partially lifted, and it was quiet. Noise pollution really plummeted. So can we learn from this experience, or will we all go back to business as usual? And sort of, I fear, I hate to be a skeptic, but I've lived on this planet long enough. I fear that we're just going to go back to business as usual because it's easier, and because I don't think enough people are willing to do the hard work necessary to really rewire our brains to think differently, to throttle back, tread more lightly on this earth, and kind of leave less of a footprint. So my big question for the world community is, what will you do? What will you do each and every day to make this planet a healthier place and a healthier environment, not only for humans, but for all of the creatures who live on this earth, for all creatures in the sea, for all creatures in the sky, and for creatures who live on the earth? We really have to start thinking in a more holistic, kind, and intelligent manner, if we have any hope of kind of realigning the future for this planet and the future for the future generations. And that's really what I spent last summer kind of living amongst all of these ideas. And it was an intense thing. So if there's any questions or you want to start a discussion, I'd be more than happy to do that. If you'd like to know how I made the images, I drew the images on my iPad, and that was a really fun way of drawing for me. But I'd be happy to take any questions or anything. So opening it up.
Hey, Emily.
Hey.
I have you on my TV, so I just tried plugging it in now that I was home, and so it was wonderful to see your images up super close and personal. And as you know, I love your work, and from the first was it the first one that I read, was it Menopause? Was that the first?
I think it was Graphic Therapy.
It was Graphic Therapy. Yeah, I mean, you're really always just super spot on with the politics of the day, and so smartly written, as well as beautifully drawn. And this one, I don't think is any different. And it's really sad for me. I mean, I grew up also at the same time as you. And so remembering those same, the Native American Indian on the side of the highway, looking at the trash, was also equally affecting for me. Unlike you, I also grew up with a father who was a naturalist. So I guess one of the things that I would hope comes from the pandemic was the pause, right? Was the time for us to all stop and look and think and observe. And I hope that other people have been as observant of their surroundings and what's been happening as you have been in this graphic novel. I guess my question for you is, what's next? What are you working on next?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's a good question. There's a lot of things in the works, but what I would like to do is I want to get this story out to a wider audience. And one of the things with getting this grant was that I wanted to open it up to the Penn State community and possibly do some of these kind of talks. And since we can do things remotely, I think it would be interesting, but possibly bring it to classes at the 22 campuses across, the Commonwealth, and start a conversation with people. So maybe do it in biology classes, maybe do it in philosophy classes, maybe do it in a whole variety of places, because I would like to I want to get this conversation outside of my head and into a larger arena. And really, that was my idea for the whole community aspect of this grant, is to take it on the road and have a series of conversations with the younger generation, because really they are the ones who are going to do the work. And they seem very willing and able to pick it up. But yeah, so that's one thing I'm working on. There's a couple of other things I'm working on. Visual narratives about family, visual narratives about, I'm getting a book proposal together. So I mean, there's a whole range of projects out there, but I want to get this one in front of a wider audience.
Well, it's funny that you say.
I actually sent it out to many publications, but I didn't get it in there. But I'm not going to give up. I will see if I can get it out there.
Well, it's funny because that you said that. I don't know if you've read the chat, but Karen Kiefer Boyd has a comment or a question for you. She says, bravo, calling all of us to be accountable for our environmental footprint. Question, do you have a publisher or already published, and will it be in K through 12 and university libraries? So I will tell you, if you don't already know this, if your piece has an ISBN number, you can put it in our university library. You can donate a copy to the library.
Oh, cool. Cool. So it has not been published. It's only exists now as images. I do not have a publisher yet. I am in talks with Kendra Beaulieu of the Penn State University Press. So it's possible that that could be, maybe we could work something out there. But I would love for this to be in K through 12 and actually in, I mean, this would be a perfect zine, I think, for K through 12. So that's a great idea. And if you have any ideas of how I can kind of connect with people to make that happen, I would be thrilled to hear. That's a great idea.
Are there any other, you can put questions in the chat. Are there any other questions for Emily? Okay.
Yay!
This was really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bonnie has a message here. She said she was sorry she was late. Are there any of the images on your website? Well, I will tell everyone that because Emily was one of our grantees this year, her work in total is on the S3A website. And there's also a fabulous interview with her where she's talking about this graphic novel, but you've also published your other novels in some pretty reputable places, not least of which was the New Yorker.
Yeah. And actually this one, The Reckoning, will be published by Cleaver Magazine in June. So that's going to be coming out in June. I actually might link it to this recording, if I may, to put on the Cleaver website. I think that might be cool. But one other thing, Bonnie, I'm really glad you asked that. One of the things that I want to do is create an installation for an art show and have these pages blown up to wall size and have them sort of like wall size vinyl things that are attached to the wall so that people can like literally walk in and feel like they're in a comic book and sort of get immersed by the story. So that is something that I'm kind of figuring out how to get a venue for that. Any ideas would be most welcome.
Well, I think, we'll definitely be in touch with you and see if we can get something up at University Park, but I did see the one that you did a few years ago at the Abington Art Center and it was totally fabulous.
Oh, thank you.
Bonnie says she's always a fan, and there was one other chat, let me see here. Karen asks, will the S3A recordings be available for classes? While not scheduled for next year, this presentation, the graphic novel, would be ideal for Art Ed 523, transdisciplinary creativity, eco-social justice, art, love the mural size idea.
Wow.
Alex, I don't know if you're on here and if you can address when the recordings will be available. I know for some of them, we do need to do a little bit of editing. Hi, Alex.
Hi, I'm here, just in the background. Yeah, so it just is a matter of me going in individually and kind of splicing them up because unfortunately, a lot of them start recording right away. So they get to hear my whole tech spiel, which isn't very interesting. So I have to go in and edit all of those, but I'm hoping to try to have them done by end of May, would be maybe a good deadline.
I'm assuming, Alex, that you know Karen?
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that we're just thinking out loud here informally, but I would love to see some things build out of the conference. And so if there was something like S3A could fund a visiting artist, it sounds like Emily would be a great match for Karen's graduate students and her class.
What does Karen teach? I was just going to ask that.
Well, she looks like she teaches art education, but Alex, you could answer maybe more readily.
Karen, do you want to talk about what you teach, or?
Can she speak?
Yeah.
Can we allow her to speak? Yeah.
Can you hear me? Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Yes, fantastic, Emily. And I loved your workshop that I went to as well some time ago. And you might remember some exchange of some feedback on some comic that I did during that workshop dealing with my lungs.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi,
Karen.
Karen.
Lungs.
Yes,
Okay.
now I know who you are. Okay.
Okay, that's me. Yes, I teach. I'm in art education, and know Alex from even before she came to Penn State. And but the class, I do teach this transdisciplinary creativity. It has been a special topics for some time, and it is now a permanent course. It has not been offered yet as a permanent course. I'm hoping perhaps next fall or this spring, if possible, this coming spring, next spring. Next fall, I teach Including Difference, this one coming up, the 2021. And, I want to do something with Upstandard Comics that is also connected, but not as it can be in relationship to environment. So there's lots of ways that, and I also do that in my visual culture and educational technologies undergrad class of 300 level that will soon change its title to, I don't know, something like bioethics and transdisciplinary dialogues or something like that. We're still working on that, and its changed title will, that all takes like about a year or so for that to happen. But the course is on the books and taught, and I teach it the way that I imagine it will be permanently, changing the description and stuff to update it from whenever was originally written. 12
Well,
years
I
ago.
would love to connect with you and talk about that, because I think I remember your work was great, and I would love to work with you and your students in whatever way would be, positive. I'd be interested in that.
Well, fantastic. So I do have your email, and we'll go from there. So thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to make a little plug here for those people that were interested in some of the work that Emily's doing, that she's actually embarking on a pretty exciting, what I think is an exciting journey for the university, with Bill Doan, is that how you say his last name? In the medical humanities. And so you're going to be doing a symposium possibly, and some graphic novel work. It might be interesting to pull in some of the art ed folks, especially at the graduate level, into that. So
Yeah. So we're working with Bill Doan, who is in theater performance. He's in SOVA, and he was the Penn State laureate last year. He came to Penn State Addington and gave us he's wonderful. We love Bill. And Michael Green is a medical doctor at Hershey who started the graphic medicine program. Literally, he didn't start the program, he started the concept. This guy is amazing. So he's a medical doctor who draws comics, and the three of us got together and are working on a exhibition called Masked, which is basically about why we wear masks, what it's about, what does it mean to be masked, coming out of last year's thing. And we're going to have a symposium on the idea of masking and graphic medicine in general. So if anyone's interested in that, give me a buzz, and we can talk. Yes, Michael Green is incredible. Really interesting guy.
This is another kind of proposition. I don't know if this is something that you're interested in, but I was funded a grant to put together an exhibition of Penn State artists and educators who were talking about mental health in some capacity through their artwork. And I'm kind of poking Bill Doan to join me on that, because we've been having conversations about it for a while.
Yes, please.
Okay. I was hoping that you might be, because I know some of your past work talks about that, but I'm looking for maybe 4 or 5 artists that are interested in responding to some prompts about that experience in higher ed and just seeing where it goes.
That would be fantastic.
Awesome.
And I have some other people who you might be. Are you interested in visual narrative specifically, or anything?
Any kind of media, any kind of medium that you are interested in. It's more about getting the experience of mental health and higher ed, and kind of looking at it from a faculty perspective, I think would be interesting. So
interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, that'd be great. Let's talk about that.
I also I'm just going to keep promoting you, Emily. Emily is also a fabulous painter. So she does the graphic novel things, but her paintings are equally, they're gorgeous and stunning. So that also deal on the same thing. So you should show her both.
I will. Thank you. You guys, you're making my head swell.
Do you have a date for the symposium that you mentioned?
We don't know, because it's probably going to happen sometime in the 2021-22 cycle.
Okay, thanks. Great.
So but we'll keep you posted.
Okay, great.
Okay. Anything else, guys?
Emily, thank you. Thank you so much. This was fabulous.
Thank you. And it was really fun.
thank you.
All right. Good to see you, Alex, for the first time.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Bye, everybody.